I think I didn't do anything wrong, just one small, stupid moment that everyone blew out of proportion. It was my ex's birthday, and I kissed him, barely a second, right there at the party. My husband walked out without a word, and somehow I became the monster while he became the man with the plan. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. I'm Iris Vale, and I swear I didn't do anything wrong. It was just a kiss, a tiny one, at a crowded birthday party where everyone was laughing and filming anyway. My ex, Colin, leaned in. The music was loud, people were cheering, and I went along with it. It was supposed to be funny, maybe even nostalgic. My husband, Ethan, was right there, but he didn't shout or make a scene. He just stood up, buttoned his jacket, and walked out. The silence that followed felt heavier than if he'd screamed. Everyone stared at me like I'd slapped him instead of kissed someone else. I laughed it off, saying he was too serious, that people needed to relax. But when I got home that night, his side of the bed was untouched, and the house smelled faintly of printer ink. I thought he was being dramatic, punishing me for being confident. Now I see that maybe he was just getting ready. People think consequences come like storms, with shouting and chaos. But Ethan's came quietly, one document at a time. I thought I could control the story. I thought I was still the victim. I was wrong. It started at the rooftop bar on a Friday night, the kind of place with string lights, fake ivy walls, and a playlist that made everyone think they were 22 again. It wasn't even supposed to be about Colin. It was his birthday, sure, but for me it was a break from routine, a chance to feel like someone interesting again. Work had been brutal all week. Deadlines, emails, endless meetings where I felt invisible until someone needed a favor. Ethan hadn't said much lately, just the usual. Questions about bills, reminders about Tessa's school trip, and that quiet sigh whenever I mentioned going out. He didn't stop me, though. He never does. He just gives that calm, unreadable look that makes me feel like I've already done something wrong. Mara met me downstairs before the party. She's the one who said I looked dangerous in the best way when she saw the red dress. I laughed because I needed to hear that. She told me Ethan was lucky, that men forget their wives are still women. I agreed. It felt good to agree with someone who saw things my way. Colin's party was already loud when we arrived. The view stretched over the city, lights glittering, glasses clinking, and people shouting over the music. Colin was at the center of it all. Easy smile, sleeves rolled up, holding court like always. He spotted me instantly, grinned wide, and pulled me into a hug that lingered a bit too long for something innocent. I didn't mind. I liked the attention. After all, I hadn't felt noticed in months. Ethan showed up 20 minutes later, still in his office clothes. He looked out of place, calm, neat, unbothered by the noise. He greeted Colin politely, shook hands, then found a seat near the edge of the crowd. I waved him over once or twice, but he just smiled that careful smile of his and stayed where he was. I told myself he was fine, that he was just letting me have fun. Mara ordered another round of drinks. People started taking photos, groups posing, laughing, posting in real time. Someone shouted for Colin to make a speech. He stood on a chair, made some joke about surviving his 30s, then thanked everyone. When he looked at me and said, "Especially Iris, who keeps me sane at work," the crowd cheered. I felt my cheeks heat, but I smiled through it. I thought Ethan would too. Instead, when I glanced over, he was looking down at his phone. Then came the moment. It happened faster than I could process. Colin grabbed my hand, said something about me being his favorite person in marketing, and kissed me, just like that. The crowd gasped, then laughed, then clapped. Someone shouted, "Oh my God, get a room!" I laughed too, even though my heart was racing. It wasn't even on the lips, not really. More of a brush, a spark, the kind of thing people do for attention, not love. I looked over at Ethan, expecting maybe a smirk, maybe even jealousy. But his face didn't move. He just watched. Then he turned, adjusted his cufflinks, and walked straight out. At first, I thought he was going to the restroom or taking a call. I didn't chase him. Why would I? I wasn't going to make a scene over something so small. Mara whispered that he'd cool off, that men like him always do. I told her it wasn't a big deal. Everyone saw it was just a joke. But when I checked my phone a few minutes later, I saw his name light up the screen. Just one message. "We'll talk properly." The words were calm, too calm. I showed Mara and rolled my eyes, saying he was being dramatic. She said he probably just needed reassurance. I told her he could reassure himself. I wasn't going to apologize for being friendly at a party. If he wanted a wife who sat quietly in the corner, he should have married someone else. Still, as the night went on, the energy shifted. Colin got pulled into another conversation, and people started leaving. Every now and then, I caught someone glancing at me like they didn't know whether to laugh or pity me. When I said goodbye to Colin, he winked and said, "Hope I didn't get you in trouble." I told him not to flatter himself. My marriage wasn't that fragile. Outside, the air was cooler. I called a cab and checked my phone again, no new messages. I thought about calling Ethan, but decided not to. He'd come home eventually. He always did. When I walked into the house, it was silent. No TV, no lights except the kitchen one. His car was in the driveway, though. That surprised me. I thought maybe he'd gone somewhere to clear his head. On the counter sat 2 mugs, his and mine. His was clean, turned upside down on the rack. Mine still had lipstick on the rim. The dishwasher hummed softly. I opened it and saw it half full. He'd run a cycle. That's what stuck out to me, the calmness of it all. He didn't yell. He didn't call. He just did the dishes. I went upstairs. His work bag wasn't on the bed anymore. It was in the guest room. The door was half closed, light spilling through the crack. I pushed it open quietly. He was sitting at the desk, typing something on his laptop. He looked up, nodded once, then back at the screen. I asked if he was still upset. He said he wasn't upset, just tired. I told him it was silly to leave a party over nothing. He said, "It wasn't nothing." I said, "It was a joke." He said, "To you." I rolled my eyes, told him people were making too big a deal out of something harmless. He said, "People?" I said, "The crowd, the internet, everyone." He asked, "Is that who you live for now?" I didn't answer. Instead, I noticed a notepad on the desk with neat handwriting, dates, short lines, things like video upload, Hatsharm account transfer, Charmies, downtown 945. I frowned and asked what that was. He said, "Work reminders." I said, "You never write those down." He said, "Some things are easier when they're visible." I didn't like how calm he sounded. When I went to bed, I tried to text Mara again, but she didn't reply. Probably asleep. The house felt too big, too clean. I turned over, expecting to hear him walk down the hall. Instead, I heard a soft mechanical sound from the guest room. A printer. I almost laughed. It was so absurd. Who prints anything at midnight? I thought about asking, but I didn't want to give him the satisfaction of thinking I cared. He was probably just sorting work documents. He's like that, methodical when he feels ignored. I woke up around 5. His side of the bed was untouched. Downstairs, the coffee machine was running. I stood in the doorway and watched him pour 2 mugs. He set one on the counter near the fridge, one by the sink, opposite ends like 2 distant planets. He didn't look at me when I said good morning, just said, "Busy day." I tried to sound casual. I asked if we were still okay. He said, "Define okay." I said, "Still married, still talking." He said, "We're talking." Then he rinsed his mug and left it perfectly dry. I told myself he'd come around once he realized how small it all was. Everyone overreacted when they were embarrassed. He was just prideful. I told myself that all day while I scrolled through photos people had posted from the party. There I was, laughing under the string lights, hair catching the glow. The caption read, "When your past meets your present." It had over 200 likes in an hour. I felt a strange mix of pride and dread. The comments were divided, some cheering, some judging. One said, "Her husband looks like he's watching his life collapse in real time." I deleted that one before I could think about it too much. That evening, he came home at the same time as always. He hung his jacket neatly on the rack, washed his hands, and checked the stove. I tried to joke, asking if he'd forgiven me yet. He said, "There's nothing to forgive if it was nothing." His tone wasn't sarcastic. "Just plain." I said, "Exactly. So we're fine." He nodded, but his eyes didn't match the nod. He went to the guest room again. I followed him, asking why he was sleeping there. He said, "You seem happier in crowds. I'm giving you space." I said, "That's manipulative." He said, "You'd know." That shut me up for a second. I told him he was twisting things to make himself look like the victim. He said, "I don't need to look like anything. I just am what's left." I didn't know what to say. He closed the laptop softly, stood, and walked past me. As he passed, I caught a faint scent of toner again. That's when I noticed a small USB drive taped under the edge of a folder labeled Taxes. It was too deliberate to be random. I almost asked about it, but something told me not to. I didn't want to seem paranoid. Later that night, I stared at the ceiling, listening for any sound from the other room. Nothing but quiet typing, then a soft click. The locked drawer. That tiny metallic sound felt like a warning, though I couldn't say why. I told myself it was just him being dramatic again. But when I closed my eyes, I kept seeing his face from the party. Calm, detached, almost resolved. For the first time, I couldn't tell who was really in control anymore. The morning after that text, I tried to act normal. I made pancakes for Tessa, packed her lunch, and pretended everything was fine. Ethan left early, as usual, but when I glanced at his phone on the counter, I saw that same calendar alert flash again. Downtown 9:45. No company name, no reminder details, just that. I almost laughed. Who schedules something so vague? But the thought stayed with me while I got ready for work. At the office, I couldn't focus. My coworkers kept whispering, and I caught more than one person glancing at me, then away. It didn't take long to figure out why. Someone had posted another clip from Colin's birthday, the exact second he leaned in and kissed me. The camera caught my smile, the crowd cheering, and Ethan's face in the background cold and expressionless. The comments were brutal. Some called it romantic, most called it humiliating. I told myself it wasn't my fault. People love drama online. They twist everything into a story. Still, I deleted the video from my page and posted something else to bury it. A photo of my coffee and laptop with the caption, "Monday Mood, Focus on Growth." That's what people like me did. Reframe. Control the narrative. When I got home that night, Ethan was already there, sitting at the dining table with his laptop open. He didn't even look up when I said hi. I asked how work was. He said fine. I tried again, saying we should talk about the party, get past it. He said, we don't need to talk about what's already public. I told him people were overreacting, that I couldn't control what others filmed. He said, you controlled the moment before they filmed. That line stung. I tried to defend myself, saying Colin caught me off guard. Ethan looked at me for a long moment and said, you kissed him back. The way he said it, quiet, factual, made it sound like evidence, not emotion. I snapped that he was being childish, that he cared more about optics than my feelings. He said, you cared about optics when you smiled for the cameras. I hated how calm he was. No shouting, no anger, just that steady, polite voice that made me feel like I was losing even while he sounded peaceful. I told him he was punishing me with silence. He said, if silence feels like punishment, maybe you need to listen to what it's saying. I went to our bedroom, slammed the door, and cried. Not because I felt guilty, but because I felt powerless. I wanted him to fight, to say something ugly, anything that would let me win by apologizing later. Instead, he gave me nothing to react to. Just quiet. 2 days later, Mara and I met for lunch near the office. She said she'd seen the clip and that people were talking. I laughed it off and said everyone needed to mind their own business. She asked if Ethan was okay. I told her he was sulking. She said maybe he was hurt. I told her he was overreacting and that men like him always think everything's betrayal if it doesn't flatter their ego. Mara didn't respond right away. She just said, be careful how you spin this, Iris. People remember what you post. That bothered me more than it should have. I changed the subject, asked about her new project, and pretended not to notice her hesitation. But as I was leaving, she said something that stayed with me. He's not arguing with you because he doesn't need to. I didn't ask what she meant. I didn't want to. That night, Ethan was in the kitchen again, moving with that quiet precision he had. He was labeling folders, household, utilities, bank. I asked if he was reorganizing things. He said yes. I told him it looked obsessive. He said, it's clarity. I asked if he was planning something. He said, planning keeps people from falling apart. I wanted to grab the folder and tear it open, but instead I poured myself a glass of wine and said he could stop pretending to be the victim. He said, I'm not pretending. I told him I'd had enough of this Cold War routine. He said, then end it. I didn't know how to respond, so I went upstairs and called my mother. I told her Ethan was being distant. She said maybe I should stop trying to prove points and start listening. I told her she was taking his side. She said, I'm taking your future's side. That didn't make any sense to me, but it made me uneasy. The next morning, Tessa asked why Daddy wasn't eating breakfast with us anymore. I said he had meetings early. She said he used to wait for her bus. I told her people change when they get busier. She looked at me in that quiet, knowing way kids sometimes do. It made me want to scream. That night, Ethan came home later than usual. He looked calm, even peaceful. I tried again, softer this time. I said I was sorry if he felt embarrassed. He said, I don't feel embarrassed. I feel finished. The words hung there. I laughed nervously, asked if he was saying we were done. He said, I'm saying I've stopped expecting honesty. I told him that was unfair, that he'd already decided I was guilty of something worse than what actually happened. He said, what happened is enough. Then he turned back to his laptop, where I caught a glimpse of something: columns, dates, notes. I stepped closer and saw titles: April, event video, May, restaurant clip, June, financials. My stomach tightened. I asked if he was tracking me. He said, "Tracking keeps the truth straight." I told him that was insane. He said, "It's organized." I tried to grab the laptop, but he closed it calmly and said, "You'll only make it worse." I demanded to know what that meant. He said, "You'll see." I barely slept that night. Every sound in the house felt louder: the hum of the fridge, the click of the hallway light, the faint rustle from the guest room. I checked my phone twice, half expecting a message from him saying it was all fine. Nothing came. By the next morning, I'd convinced myself to fix everything. I bought his favorite coffee beans and baked muffins before he got home from work. When he walked in, I smiled like nothing had happened. He thanked me politely, poured coffee, and sat at the table. I asked if we could start over. He said, "You can start wherever you like." I said, "So can you." He said, "I already did." It didn't even sound angry, just factual, final. That weekend, Mara stopped by with groceries. She looked uneasy, said she'd run into Colin at a networking event. Apparently he'd joked about the kiss again, calling it the moment that broke a marriage. I laughed to show it didn't bother me, but Mara didn't laugh back. She said maybe I should stop defending it. I said maybe people should stop treating me like a criminal. She said, "You made it public? He's just reacting?" I didn't tell Ethan that Colin had been talking. I didn't want to give him more reasons to act superior. Still, I caught him later that night standing on the balcony, staring out at the dark like he was counting something only he could see. When he came back in, I noticed a small envelope on the counter, addressed in his handwriting, to self. I asked what it was. He said, "A reminder." I said, "Of what?" He said, "Deadlines." When he went upstairs, I opened it. Inside was just a date, Friday, 10:15 a.m. Nothing else. I put it back quickly before he could catch me. My heart was pounding for reasons I couldn't name. That Friday morning, he dressed earlier than usual. I asked if he had a big meeting. He said, "Something like that." He kissed Tessa on the head, said goodbye, and left without looking at me. The sound of the front door closing felt sharp, final. At work, I kept checking my phone. I told myself he was probably running errands, that I was imagining things. Around noon, a coworker from HR asked if I had a minute. She said someone had emailed a link to the company's board, a link to that same video from the party, with comments about professional conduct. My chest went cold. I asked who sent it. She said it was from an anonymous account. I didn't need to ask who. When I got home, he was at the kitchen table again, flipping through documents. I accused him immediately, said he was sabotaging my career. He said, "You did that yourself." I said he was cruel. He said, "I'm careful." I demanded to know why he'd do something like that. He said, "It's not about punishment. It's about record keeping." Then he stood, poured himself a glass of water, and said he had an appointment in the morning. Before bed, I heard the faint beep of his phone alarm. Paper drop, 8:30. I asked what that was. He said, "Just a reminder." I wanted to grab the phone, shake him, scream that he was destroying everything for nothing, but he looked so calm that it scared me. I lay awake long after he went silent. The house smelled faintly of toner again. The printer light blinked in the dark, soft and steady, like something alive. By Monday, I'd convinced myself that paper drop had nothing to do with me. Maybe he was printing work files or dropping off documents for his firm. Ethan always had side projects: organizing, planning, being methodical to the point of obsession. I told myself that was all it was. I needed to believe that because the alternative, him preparing something against me, felt impossible. Still, the unease wouldn't leave. Even small things started feeling deliberate. The way he placed his mug precisely opposite mine every morning. The new folders labeled in perfect black ink. Household, utilities, medical, education, everything with neat dividers. I opened one while he was at work and found only receipts. Nothing incriminating, but the order of it scared me. It looked like evidence waiting for context. At work, things were worse. The HR situation hadn't gone away. They said the incident at the party had drawn complaints, that some clients didn't appreciate the publicity. I tried to argue it was harmless, a misunderstanding, but their eyes said they'd already judged me. I told them my husband was the one leaking things, that he had a personal vendetta. The HR manager said calmly, "Then maybe you should speak to him privately before assuming." That tone, the same calm, measured tone Ethan used, infuriated me. I left before I said something I couldn't take back. At home, Ethan was sitting on the couch, laptop open again. The faint glow of the spreadsheet lit his face. I asked if he'd seen the new mess at my job. He said, "Yes, just that." I asked if he had something to do with it. He said, "I don't share things that aren't mine." I said, "That sounds like a lie." He said, "That sounds like projection." I hated him in that moment, how he could sound superior without raising his voice. I told him he was acting like a judge, not a husband. He said, "I'm neither. I'm a witness." The phrase hit differently. I asked what he was witnessing. He said, "Everything you think no one notices." I told him he was paranoid. He said, "You said that before." Then he got up and walked to the guest room, shutting the door gently behind him. The soft click of the lock made my throat tighten. Later that night, I couldn't sleep. The silence of the house felt thick. I got up, went downstairs, and saw the faint red light of the printer blinking again. I walked closer and noticed a single page in the tray, blank, except for the word archive. It didn't make sense. I picked it up, looked at it under the kitchen light, plain white sheet, one word in small type at the top. I put it back where it was, but the word burned in my head for the rest of the night. The next day, Mara called. She said people at work were avoiding me, that Colin had posted something stupid, another photo from the party, this time cropped to show just the kiss. The caption read, "Old habits die hard." It had hundreds of reactions already. I told her he was doing it for attention, that he wanted to humiliate me. She said maybe he was trying to save face because everyone thought I led him on. I snapped that she didn't know what she was talking about. She sighed and said, "Iris, you're losing people. They think you're proud of this." That word again, proud. It made me defensive. I told her I wasn't losing anyone worth keeping. Then I hung up before she could say more. When Ethan came home that evening, he set his briefcase down and looked around like he was taking inventory. I told him we needed to talk. He said, "We are talking." I said, "No, we need to fix this." He said, "You're fixing an image. I'm fixing reality." I demanded to know what that meant. He said, "It means you can't spin truth the way you spin a story online." I told him he was trying to make himself the hero. He said, "Heroes explain themselves. I don't need to." That night, I heard him on the phone, his voice low, calm. He said things like, "I've organized the statements, and yes, I'll bring copies." I stood in the hallway listening, my pulse racing. When I walked in, he ended the call. I asked who it was. He said, "Follow up." I told him that wasn't an answer. He said, "It's all the answer you'll get tonight." I wanted to scream, but the control in his voice made me hesitate. Instead, I poured wine, went out to the balcony, and posted a new photo. Me smiling at sunset, captioned, "Strong women don't wait for apologies." It got over 100 likes in an hour. The validation felt like a breath of air. The next morning, Linda, his mother, called. Her voice was careful. She said she'd seen the video online, that people were talking. I tried to sound calm, told her it was being blown out of proportion. She said, "Do you know what Ethan's been doing?" I asked what she meant. She said, "He's been getting advice. Real advice. The kind that doesn't end with a fight." I laughed and said he was dramatic. She said, "No, he's deliberate." Then she added quietly, "He's not the type to lose twice." That line stayed with me long after I hung up. That evening, Ethan didn't come home until late. When he did, he carried a stack of neatly bound folders and set them on the dining table. I asked what they were. He said, "Copies." I asked of what. He said, "Things that matter." I told him he was being cryptic on purpose. He said, "I'm being careful because you like to twist words." I walked over, trying to snatch the folders, but he just stepped aside calmly. I said, "You can't just record everything and pretend you're innocent." He said, "I don't need to pretend." I told him he was cruel, that no one would believe him if he tried to make me look bad. He said, "They don't have to believe me. They'll see for themselves." His confidence terrified me more than anger ever could. I went upstairs shaking. In our bedroom, I found a small sticky note on my vanity mirror. "Bring forms." My throat went dry. I didn't know if he meant for me to see it or if it was another quiet reminder to himself. That night, I sat in bed scrolling through social media again, trying to drown it out. But everything online was still the same. People talking about the kiss, the comments, the fallout. The narrative had shifted. Now I was the villain. Even Mara had stopped liking my posts. Ethan passed by the doorway once, looked at me, and said softly, "You've built a crowd. I've built a case." Then he closed the door behind him. I didn't sleep at all after that. My mind spun with possibilities. Divorce? Some kind of legal complaint? No, that would be absurd. What could he even claim? That I embarrassed him? You don't lose a marriage over optics. I told myself that again and again, but it didn't stick. The next morning, I found him at the kitchen table, dressed neatly, sipping coffee. I asked if he was meeting someone. He said, "Just errands." I said, "Downtown?" He looked at me then, eyes calm, unreadable. "Yes," he said, "downtown." I tried to act indifferent, but I watched from the window as he drove away. His car turned toward the city, and for a second I saw his brake lights flash, 2 short bursts like punctuation marks. At work, I couldn't concentrate. HR called again. They said the board had received an anonymous package, printouts, screenshots, time-stamped records of my posts. I asked to see them, but they wouldn't show me. I felt the blood drain from my face. Someone had archived everything. Every caption, every comment, even the messages I'd deleted. When I got home, I confronted him. I asked if he'd done it. He said, "You gave them the material. I just arranged it." I called him vindictive. He said, "I'm just using what's mine." I demanded he stop whatever he was planning. He said, "You should have thought about stopping before the cameras did." I told him he was destroying our family. He said, "I'm protecting it." That night, the guest room door stayed locked. Around midnight, I heard a soft ding from his laptop, followed by the voice of an automated assistant. File uploaded successfully. Then silence. I sat in the dark kitchen afterward, staring at my reflection in the window. For the first time, I realized maybe this wasn't a standoff anymore. Maybe it was already over, and I was just the last one who didn't know it. The next weekend, Linda invited us for dinner. It was supposed to be a family talk, though I could already guess what kind. Ethan drove us there in silence, hands steady on the wheel, eyes fixed on the road. Tessa sat in the back, humming softly, unaware of the tension curling between us. I tried to make conversation, said maybe we could go somewhere after, but he just said, "Let's get through dinner first." Linda's house smelled like roasted herbs and polish, the same mix it always had. She greeted Tessa warmly, hugged her tight, then nodded at me with polite distance. "We need calm tonight," she said quietly. Ethan didn't answer, just helped set the table. Everything felt staged, like we were actors playing our old selves for one last show. Dinner started fine. Linda asked Tessa about school. I smiled, added small comments, but Ethan stayed quiet. When Tessa left the table to feed the dog, Linda finally spoke. "Ethan showed me the clips, Iris." Her voice was steady, too steady. I asked what clips. She said, "You know which ones?" I laughed lightly, said we weren't really going to talk about some silly party again. She said, "That's the difference between silly and shameful. You can't tell them apart." I felt heat rise in my face. I said she had no right to meddle in our marriage. She said she wasn't meddling. She was witnessing the damage. Ethan still didn't speak, didn't defend me or her. He just sat there, watching, hands folded neatly on the table. That calm made me want to scream. I told them both they were making me look like a villain over one harmless moment. Linda said, "You did that yourself, dear?" When we got home, I slammed the door. I told Ethan his mother was cruel, that he should have stood up for me. He said, "She didn't say anything untrue." I said, "You're supposed to protect me." He said, "From consequences?" I followed him to the kitchen, shouting that I was done being treated like a criminal. He said quietly, "Then stop acting like one." I grabbed his wrist, but he pulled away without force, just calm distance. That calm hurt more than if he'd shouted. He went to the guest room again, door locking with that soft click. The next morning, I found a sticky note on the fridge. Tessa pickup, 3. Simple, neat, his handwriting. I crumpled it, tossed it in the trash. I told myself he was being dramatic again, that I wouldn't feed into it. By afternoon, I met Mara at a coffee shop. She looked uncomfortable, fidgeting with her straw. I asked if she'd seen the latest gossip online. She nodded and said people at work were concerned. I said they should focus on their own lives. She hesitated, then said, "Ethan's not the one talking, Iris. You are." I told her she was supposed to be my friend. She said, "I am. That's why I'm telling you he's moving differently. You might not be able to talk your way out this time." I didn't respond. I just watched her go, her back straight, like she was walking away from something contaminated. When I got home, Ethan was folding laundry at the kitchen table. He looked up briefly, then back to the shirts. I said, "You really think you can punish me with silence forever?" He said, "It's not punishment, it's process." I laughed bitterly. "What are you, a lawyer now?" He said, "No. I just learned to keep records." I opened the fridge, needing something to do with my hands, and saw another small note taped inside the door. Bring forms. I stared at it. What forms? I asked. He said, the ones you've already made public. I turned to face him, demanding to know what he meant, but he just folded the last shirt and said, You'll see soon. That night, Tessa asked me why Daddy was sleeping in the other room. I told her he needed quiet to work. She asked if we were fighting. I said, No, we're just grown-ups sorting things. She nodded slowly, but the way her eyes searched mine made me look away. I tried again with Ethan before bed. I said I missed him, that we could still fix this if he just stopped turning everything into some sort of case. He said, You call it a case because you know it's evidence. I told him he was twisting things. He said, You've been twisting them for months. Then he picked up a small flash drive from the counter, pocketed it, and said, I'll handle it properly. Something about that word, properly, sent a chill through me. It wasn't a threat. It was worse. It was certainty. He went upstairs, leaving me alone in the kitchen. I sat there for a long time, staring at the dark window. My reflection looked pale and tired, a stranger rehearsing excuses. I still told myself I was the wronged one, that he'd regret humiliating me like this. But under the noise in my head, a smaller thought whispered that maybe he wouldn't. I went to the guest room door and listened. No typing this time, just quiet. Then the faint metallic sound of a drawer closing, a zipper, and the soft beep of his phone, file uploaded successfully. The next week, everything changed, though nothing looked different on the surface. Ethan moved through the house like he always did. Quiet, precise, deliberate. I tried to act normal, cooking dinner, checking Tessa's homework, answering Mara's texts. I told myself he was still just sulking, that his calmness was temporary. But there was an edge to him now, something I couldn't name. I first noticed it at breakfast. He had a stack of folders on the counter, all neat, labeled in perfect block letters. Social media, work, party videos, public comments. I asked what they were. He said simply, Notes. I laughed, told him he was obsessive. He looked at me evenly and said, I'm organized. That wasn't a joke. That was a statement. Later I found a new sticky note on the fridge. Downtown 10:30. I asked about it. He said, Appointments. I pressed him, trying to act casual, but he just gave that steady stare, the one that makes me feel like I've already lost. I left it alone, telling myself he was doing something mundane. At work, whispers followed me everywhere. People had started seeing the clips again, and the conversations weren't about the party anymore. They were about me. Comments about my behavior, jokes about my boundaries, and worst of all, quiet glances from coworkers who used to smile at me now carried judgment. I tried to laugh it off in group chats, posted a carefully filtered selfie with the caption, Still glowing, still me. It didn't matter. The moment I had controlled, the one I had framed as playful, had started to control me. When I got home that night, Ethan was sitting at the kitchen table, laptop open, typing carefully. I tried to make light of the situation, said maybe we'd overreacted, that it was just social media. He didn't look up. I asked if he'd been tracking anything. He said, Not tracking. Recording. I laughed nervously, said he was taking things too seriously. He looked at me evenly and said, Seriousness has nothing to do with it. Accuracy does. I tried to brush it off, busying myself with dinner prep. I was pouring wine when I noticed a small flash drive on the counter, taped under a folder labeled Taxes. I asked what it was. He said, Backups. I told him it wasn't necessary. He said, Better safe than sorry. His calm tone made my chest tighten. It was a subtle warning, a reminder that he had control in ways I hadn't considered. The next morning, I saw him glance at a calendar alert on his phone. Meeting, personal, 10:30. I asked what it was for. He said, Arrangements. I laughed, said he couldn't be that deliberate. He looked at me like I was naive. I can, he said. That day, I tried to reclaim the narrative with Mara. I said people overreacted and that Ethan was making mountains out of molehills. She didn't laugh. She said, You need to pay attention. He's not acting. He's preparing. I told her she was exaggerating. She said quietly, I'm not. You're the last to notice. Back at home, I found another note taped to the fridge. Bring forms. I crumpled it and threw it in the trash. I told myself it was just his obsessive nature again. But when he came in later, he looked at the trash, didn't say a word, and went to the guest room. The soft click of the lock made my stomach twist. I realized slowly that he wasn't reacting emotionally anymore. He was methodical, deliberate, controlled. That evening, Tessa asked why Daddy wasn't sitting at the table. I told her he needed space. She said quietly, "Is he mad at you?" I said no, that adults sometimes need quiet to think. She looked at me with that piercing child's honesty that I hated in moments like this. I realized that while I was trying to control Ethan's image in public, I was losing control of what mattered at home. The next day, I found him at the dining table, reviewing documents with meticulous care. I asked if he needed help. He said, "No, I need accuracy." I asked what accuracy meant. He said, "The truth in its proper place." I asked him to explain. He didn't, just the calm stare that made me feel smaller. I tried to provoke him with sarcasm, asked if this was his way of punishing me. He said, "Punishment implies intent. This is preparation." I laughed nervously. I said he was overreacting. He said, "The one who underestimates is often the last to realize." That night, I couldn't sleep. The printer in the guest room clicked faintly, almost rhythmically. I imagined what it was printing. Receipts? Evidence? A timeline of every misstep I'd made? I tried to ignore it, poured another glass of wine, and stared at the ceiling. My reflection in the dark window looked unfamiliar. The confident, daring woman who kissed Colin felt smaller, exposed, cornered. By Friday, the tension had settled into a quiet dread. Ethan left early, driving downtown. I saw him through the window, precise, deliberate, turning toward the city like clockwork. I told myself he was just handling errands, but I couldn't shake the feeling that every step was part of a plan. That afternoon, Mara called. She sounded anxious. She said people were noticing the archives, screenshots, posts, time-stamped records. I asked what she meant. She said someone had compiled everything from the party, every comment, every clip, every like, and it was circulating quietly among a small network. I laughed and said Ethan must be losing it. She said, "No, he's not losing it. He's documenting it." At home that night, Ethan was folding laundry again. He didn't look up when I entered. I asked if he was still organizing. He said simply, "Always." I asked if this was all about me. He said, "No, it's about clarity." I told him I didn't understand. He said, "You will." Then he did something that made my chest tighten. He picked up a small stack of folders, placed them neatly on the dining table, and said, "We'll sort this tomorrow." I asked him what this meant. He said, "Everything." I laughed bitterly. "Everything?" He nodded. His calmness, the certainty in his voice, made my stomach churn. I realized I had been treating this like a game, a social media performance, but he was treating it like life, or maybe law. I tried one last time to regain control. I said that maybe he was overreacting, that people would forget, that the clips and posts were nothing in the grand scheme. He said, "Nothing in the scheme matters if it leaves a permanent mark where it shouldn't." That word, permanent, was heavier than anything he'd said before. I tried to ignore it, went to the balcony, stared at the city lights, but my mind kept returning to the folders, the notes, the organized chaos of his quiet preparation. By the end of the week, I understood. Ethan wasn't reacting. He wasn't angry. He wasn't hurt in the way I expected. He was calm because he was ready. Every note, every calendar alert, every document, every flash drive, they were all pieces of a plan that I couldn't see yet. And then he said it again, that same line that froze me in place. "I'll handle it properly."